I was on a plane, and I was tired and terrified. It was winter, the weather was wild and windy, and we dropped like a rock onto the runway. Plane was still taxiing, didn't stop anyone from standing up, pulling everything out of the overhead bins. I wrapped a dark blue scarf around my head, brand new one a friend of mine had given me just days before I left. I didn't know it, but that morning there'd been a bomb threat at the airport. It was one of those official yet ambiguous threats, warnings from the U.S. Embassy, like, be vigilant for a one-legged man riding a bicycle wearing an IED. This was the kind of bizarre world I had just landed in, starting a new job, building a law library in Kabul, Afghanistan. There are few libraries in Afghanistan, and in Kabul there is only one public library for 3.6 million people. So what difference could one more library make in a country of ongoing poverty, terrorism, injustice, corruption? And you might ask, with technology charging ahead, everything on the internet anyway, are libraries even here still relevant institutions? As a librarian myself, my short answer is yes. Yes, they are. I'd like to share with you the story of the law library that I built in Kabul in 2007. I'd like you to consider why investing in an institution like a library in a country thousands of miles away is worth us, our time, our people, and our money. I mean, institutions do ordinary, even boring things, yet institutions like libraries can help us form the extraordinary connections, collaboration, and communities among citizens here and for people in countries like Afghanistan. I was first introduced to Kabul at the airport baggage claim, and it was a seething mess of chaos. The electricity had gone out that morning, and airport workers threw the luggage into the middle of the claim area, knocking over people, suitcases burst open, piled high. I thought, well, this is how things are going to work here. I had a sinking feeling I might be setting myself up to fail. And just outside the airport, you do see how Afghan institutions have failed. They have failed miserably despite the billions spent by the U.S., Europeans, United Nations, many other countries. In Afghanistan, the poverty rate is 76%. The literacy rate is 38%, and only 17% of Afghanistan's women and girls can read or write. So think about this, with technology moving forward so quickly, so drastically, if so many of your citizens don't have the tools of technology, they can't read or write, what kind of future is there for your country? This is Masood. He was one of the 4 library staff that I hired to work in the library we would build on Kabul University campus. Masood had a degree from the Sharia law faculty, that's the religious law school at Kabul University, but he'd never had professional library training, hadn't worked in a library, hadn't managed a staff, and his English was pretty basic. My Dari language was barely passable, so it was a very good thing that we would build and run a library together instead of a hospital. The library was funded by the USAID, that's the United States International Agency for Development, and the U.S. Department of Justice. It would serve judges and prosecutor training programs, and the law students and professors from Kabul University's, both of the faculties, the secular and religious law schools. The library building itself had already been constructed by the Italian aid agency, and it was a beautiful, soaring, 2-story space, beautiful marble flooring, not much else. No reference desk, no shelving, no collection, no technology. It would be my job, along with the library staff, to fill that space, and we soon found how starting from square one in Kabul is a tough place to begin. Here you see the library from the second floor. and we were building the reference desk and the shelving. We could have purchased these from outside of Afghanistan, but time, budget, and customs issues meant that local materials, local carpenters could open our doors faster. Another problem, and a much bigger one, was how to source our legal print collection. There was just so little to select from in Dari and Pashto languages. 30 years of war had destroyed the books, but it had also destroyed scholarship in Afghanistan. The majority of our Islamic legal collection we couldn't find readily available in Kabul. We couldn't order for delivery in Kabul because that was problematic. And we couldn't rely on online versions either because so often there was no electricity in the library. What I could rely on was Masood. One day we were sitting in the library sifting through the construction dust. That was about the only thing on the shelves. And he said to me, "I need to go to Pakistan." What he proposed was traveling from Kabul to bookstores in Peshawar, Islamabad, and Lahore to source our Islamic legal collection where he knew he could find it. And because I thought, that's fine. I will just hand you a few $1,000s in cash, and I trust you cross a very dangerous mountain border. You call maybe once in a couple weeks, and you come back to Kabul with bags full of books. That's exactly what happened. We couldn't source our collection there in Kabul, so the closest place was next door in Pakistan. Masood had no problem doing that. If building a library in Kabul was challenging, living there was a raw and intense experience. I shared a guest house with about 15 other colleagues. It was kind of like a reality show. We lived in dorm-like setting. We had a meal plan, we had a gym, we had some parties. Occasionally we would hear explosions in the city, and at that time usually the targets were Afghan government institutions or police, military. But really sometimes we had more to fear from ourselves than from the insurgency. Arguments could turn really nasty really, really fast over what was for dinner, or who could use the project car, or whether we should shelter in the safe room. Just outside our guarded guest house bubble, though, Kabul was a constant flow of people, animals, cars, and carts. Sometimes in the middle of the street, or intersection, you'd see the Afghan police. They'd appear out of nowhere, rocket launchers on their shoulders. Other times, there would be swarms of Humvees roaring through the city. That was the international military force. I had some weapons training, and my bedroom windows were covered with blast film. Project issued us some flak jackets in black or tan, and I thought I looked absolutely ridiculous. My colleague thought she looked fat. But even despite the security threats, and if I couldn't get up to the library, if I couldn't travel there from the guest house, the library staff showed up pretty much every day. Here's the staff the day that our one and only book cart arrived, cleared customs. You can see from their faces, it was a joyous occasion. Less joyous occasion was discovering that the first library director I hired didn't have his law degree. And some of our books did walk out of the library permanently borrowed. And I did have a library clerk who quit the library after months of great work and to get married. Probably wasn't her choice. And she cried for days and she left. I really wasn't sure how to handle that situation. I just replaced her. I'm not very proud of that. Staff showed up, though, through hot, through cold, through dust storms. The Italians' gorgeous marble flooring meant that the library space was frigidly cold in Kabul winters. We did have a number of windows, though. When the electricity cut out, the natural lighting could come in. But so could dust. Dust crept in through every crevice of that library, coating us, our books, computers, printers. Technology works really well when you have electricity, temperature control, and clean air. Sometimes we didn't have any of those things. But what we did have after some months was a small print collection. And we began building the operational foundations of the library. We drafted policies for administration, personnel, reference, collection. We developed a small computer lab and began teaching legal research in Afghan and international law. Masood researched and found an open source cataloging program, and he began cataloging our collection in Dari and Pashto languages. He even worked with one of our law clerks, sitting with her side by side, cataloging the collection. This in a country where men and women working together could potentially be at risk. Two staff did leave, but I promoted Masood to library director, hired 2 new clerks. One was a young woman who stayed on after our project ended in 2009. And later, the Afghan government funded her position. This was a small yet significant victory for the library's sustainability. And today, in 2016, the library doors are still open. Among other project activities in building the library, one of the activities I led was working with a group of Kabul University law professors to draft a Dari Pashto legal dictionary, first published after decades of war. To launch this book, we planned a big event. We invited scores of US and Afghan government VIPs. But the day before the event, our printer disappeared. Locked up his shop. No dictionaries, just a bunch of worthless proofs. Canceling the event in less than 24 hours was impossible, so the next morning I opened the program. I was completely beside myself, dove right into introductions, called the professors to the podium to speak, and then I could sense that the crowd was growing restless. And without meaning to, I had skipped the event's customary opening prayer. Now, this was a problem. Stop, apologize, pray now. I wasn't sure what to do. After the last professor had thanked our project for a book that didn't even exist, I awkwardly began my closing remarks. And that's when Masood stood from the audience, strode to the podium. And I stepped aside, and he prayed. He prayed, and everyone left happy. Left without a dictionary, but left happy. There was no incident. During my project in Kabul, many of my colleagues did the heavy lifting of institution building, like legislative drafting, judicial rules of ethics, court administration reform. But the library fit perfectly into all of these, supporting those activities. Maybe not the sexiest of institutions, but one helping guide Afghan legal scholarship back on track. And today, the library is a space where Afghan legal professionals can come and they can study and research and attend training. It's where Masood got his start, and it's where others like him can continue to come and work toward building rule of law in Afghanistan. After I left Afghanistan, Masood went on and he earned a grant from the American Association of Law Libraries to attend the annual conference in Washington, D.C. He later spent a year in Seattle, and he earned a master's in law from the University of Washington. Today, he's back in Kabul, and he works for another USAID project. He continues to build justice institutions in Afghanistan. That one public library in Kabul has 5,000 books. Here, Cleveland Public Library has 4 million items. 28 libraries in the city and suburbs. These are places we can walk into, we can use online, no matter who we are or what we do. Library institutions in volatile times lend us stability. And yet they let us exercise creativity. They are us. They are a human force in a rapidly changing world. My experience in Afghanistan was a life-changing one, but that's a talk for another time. Since Afghanistan, I've worked in Kosovo and Liberia, and like Afghanistan. These countries share many of the same post-conflict obstacles, but they can and they do support institutions like libraries. And in countries at war or at peace, strong institutions can make the difference. And one person, like Masood, or maybe two, carry on, inching future generations forward against incredible odds. Thank you.